On the night of November 15, 1966, two young couples from Point Pleasant, West Virginia, drove to a remote area outside town and encountered something they could not explain. Roger and Linda Scoberry and Steve and Mary Millett told deputies that a creature roughly 7 feet tall, with wings folded against its body and two large red eyes that appeared to glow, had risen from the darkness near an abandoned munitions plant and chased their car at speeds exceeding 100 miles per hour. They reported it to the Mason County Sheriff. He found nothing. Over the next 13 months, more than 100 people in the Point Pleasant area would report seeing the same thing, or something close to it. Then, on December 15, 1967, the Silver Bridge collapsed into the Ohio River during evening rush hour, killing 46 people. The bridge's failure has been thoroughly explained. What people saw has not. Whether the two events are connected remains genuinely unresolved. Understanding why requires examining what the evidence actually establishes and what it merely suggests. Point Pleasant sits on the Ohio River, connected to Gallipolis, Ohio, by the Silver Bridge, an I-bar suspension bridge built in 1928. In the mid-1960s, it was a small working-class town of roughly 6,000 people. Just north of town lay the McClintock Wildlife Management Area, a vast former munitions site locals called the TNT area. Concrete bunkers once used to store explosives dotted the landscape. By 1966, the site was overgrown and largely abandoned, a place for teenagers to park and for hunters to roam. That landscape matters, because the majority of the reported encounters occurred in or near it. The bridge matters because it was the only crossing for miles, and its collapse devastated the community. Before reconstructing what happened, the evidence must be sorted by type and strength, because the weight of each claim depends entirely on its source. Tier 1 evidence includes physical remains, official records, and contemporaneous documents. The collapsed bridge itself falls here, along with the Army Corps of Engineers investigation, the county sheriff's incident reports, and the newspaper articles published at the time. Tier 2 includes corroborated testimony, accounts from multiple independent witnesses who had no apparent opportunity or motive to coordinate. The Scoberry and Millett report qualifies here because four witnesses in the same vehicle described the same encounter in the same detail to the same deputy that same night. Subsequent reports from unrelated witnesses across different dates and locations, when they share specific features without evidence of coordination, also qualify. Testimony is evidence. It is not physical evidence. Corroboration raises its weight but does not make it forensic. Tier 3 covers single-source claims. Individual sighting reports with no corroboration fall here. So do most of the Men in Black stories and UFO encounters that would later become attached to the case. These are used with caution. Not evidence includes internet-era retellings that add or alter details, anonymous second-hand accounts, pattern matching without a causal mechanism, and any claim that something must be true because it cannot be proven false. Two logical rules apply throughout: correlation is not causation, meaning a named mechanism must connect two events for their co-occurrence to be meaningful. An absence of evidence is not evidence of absence, meaning the lack of physical proof does not disprove the witnesses saw something real. It simply means what they saw left no recoverable trace. Two anomalies anchor the case. First, the official record cannot account for what over 100 witnesses actually saw, because the creature they described matches no known species in the region, and the consistency of the description, specifically the red glowing eyes, the reported height, and the winged form, resists easy reduction to a single misidentified animal. Second, the official record cannot account for the temporal correlation between the sightings and the collapse, because no causal mechanism has been established linking anomalous wildlife sightings to infrastructure failure, yet the reports concentrated in the 13 months before the disaster and essentially ceased after it. Both anomalies must be addressed by any complete explanation. Neither, on its own, proves a connection. From Tier 1 evidence and corroborated Tier 2 testimony only, the following can be stated with confidence. The Silver Bridge collapsed on December 15, 1967, killing 46 people, due to a fracture in I-bar number 330 of the north chain. The fracture was caused by stress corrosion cracking and corrosion fatigue in a non-redundant structural system that had been carrying traffic loads far beyond its 1928 design capacity. Multiple independent witnesses reported seeing a large, winged creature with red eyes in and around Point Pleasant between November 1966 and December 1967. These reports were made to law enforcement and local media at the time. No physical evidence of the creature, meaning no photographs of clear quality, no biological samples, no tracks, was ever recovered. The reports declined sharply after the bridge collapse. The evidence establishes that people saw something they could not identify. It does not establish what that something was. It establishes that the bridge fell. It does not establish that the two phenomena were linked. The first widely reported encounter occurred on November 1, 1966, when 5 men digging a grave at a cemetery near Clendenin, roughly 60 miles from Point Pleasant, reported a brown, human-like figure flying low over the trees. 2 weeks later, on November 15, the Scoberry and Millette couples drove to the TNT area. They told Deputy Millard Halstead that a large, gray creature with glowing red eyes rose from behind a concrete bunker and pursued their vehicle as they fled toward Route 62. Halstead's contemporaneous report, confirmed by the Point Pleasant Register, documents that the 4 witnesses appeared genuinely shaken. The following night, over a period of roughly 3 hours, an independent group of 4 adults in the same area reported an identical encounter to the sheriff's office. These 2 incidents, occurring on consecutive nights from separate parties, form the core of the corroborated record. Through the winter of 1966 and into 1967, reports continued. Some witnesses described the creature perched on rooftops or hovering near cars. Several reported that their vehicles' headlights dimmed or their radios malfunctioned during the encounter. What followed in those cases is reconstructed from individual testimony, meaning Tier 3 evidence, and must be treated accordingly. On November 16, the day after the first major sighting, the Point Pleasant Register ran a front-page story under the headline "Couples See Man-Sized Bird, Creature, Something." The reporter, who interviewed the witnesses directly, gave the phenomenon the name that would define it: Mothman. By late 1967, the reports had slowed but not stopped. Then, at approximately 5:04 p.m. on December 15, the Silver Bridge buckled and fell. 31 vehicles plunged into the Ohio River. 46 people died. The Mothman sightings, as a concentrated phenomenon, ended with the collapse. The official record of the bridge collapse is clear and well supported. The Army Corps of Engineers and the National Transportation Safety Board conducted extensive investigations. They determined that I-bar 330 had cracked under cumulative stress, corrosion, and a design that placed the entire load on a single chain link with no redundant support. When that link failed, the entire structure failed. The bridge was a unique design, one of only 2 like it in the country. The investigation produced Tier 1 physical evidence. The collapsed structure was examined. Metal fragments were analyzed. The mechanism of failure was identified with specificity. There is no credible dispute about why the bridge fell. Regarding the Mothman sightings, no official investigation was ever conducted. Law enforcement treated the reports as a public nuisance rather than a criminal matter. Skeptical explanations emerged from wildlife biologists and journalists rather than from any formal inquiry. The most prominent theory identified the creature as a sandhill crane, a large bird that can stand over 4 feet tall with a wingspan exceeding 7 feet. Sandhill cranes were expanding their range into the Ohio River Valley in the 1960s and had been spotted in the region. The theory holds that frightened witnesses, primed by the initial reports and media coverage, misidentified a large bird in poor lighting, and their accounts escalated through suggestion. An alternative candidate is the barred owl, a large owl with dark eyes that reflect red under direct light. The official explanation, broadly defined, is that the sightings were misidentification amplified by mass suggestion, and the bridge collapse was an independent structural failure. This is the simplest account, and it explains a great deal. But it does not explain everything. Here is where you must weigh the evidence for yourself. If the creature was a sandhill crane, why did so many witnesses consistently describe red eyes that appeared to glow? Crane eyes do not glow. They do not produce light. They might reflect a headlight, but witnesses described something that seemed luminous in the absence of a direct beam. If it was an owl, why did witnesses consistently report a figure standing between 6 and 7 feet tall? A barred owl is roughly 2 feet tall. Misidentification in darkness can distort size, but it does not typically triple it. If the reports were pure suggestion, why did the first witnesses, before any media coverage existed, describe the same specific features that would define every subsequent report? These are not proof of the supernatural. They are gaps in the simplest explanation. The simplest explanation remains misidentification combined with mass suggestion and coincidence. It requires the fewest assumptions. People in darkness, frightened, saw large birds they could not identify, and the media amplified the story until every unusual shadow became Mothman. The bridge collapsed for reasons that had nothing to do with what people thought they saw in the TNT area. The temporal correlation is just that, a correlation, and without a mechanism linking anomalous sightings to metal fatigue, it does not become causation. This explanation accounts for the baseline facts. It struggles with the specific consistency of the red eye detail across independent witnesses, the reported size in close-range encounters under illumination, and the abrupt cessation of reports after the collapse, though that last point may simply reflect a community too grieving and too occupied to report unusual sightings, or a media environment that shifted focus entirely to the disaster. A second explanation holds that something real but unidentified was present in the area. Perhaps an out-of-range or atypical animal, perhaps an atmospheric or optical phenomenon not yet understood, perhaps something else entirely. This explanation takes the witness testimony at something closer to face value. It does not require the supernatural. It requires only that something happened that has not been adequately categorized. The strongest evidence for it is the consistency and volume of the reports. The strongest evidence against it is the complete absence of physical trace. An unidentified biological entity large enough to match the descriptions, inhabiting a populated area for over a year, would be expected to leave some physical record. None has ever been found. A third explanation, popularized by the journalist John Keel in his 1975 book The Mothman Prophesies, treats the creature as a preternatural or ultra-terrestrial phenomenon, an entity that appears before disasters as a warning or as an expression of something beyond normal experience. Keel connected the Mothman sightings to UFO reports, men in black encounters, and what he called windows, geographic areas prone to anomalous events. This framework accounts for the temporal correlation and the broader cluster of strange reports. It also requires the most extraordinary assumptions and rests almost entirely on Tier 3 evidence. Prior probability demands that more complex explanations meet a correspondingly higher evidentiary standard. The paranormal framework does not meet it. Several questions remain open. What did the witnesses actually see? This would require physical evidence of the kind that was never collected. In 1966, few people carried cameras. The TNT area had no surveillance. Whatever was seen left no specimen, no photograph of clear quality, no track cast. That evidence does not exist because the conditions and technology of the time did not produce it, and whatever was seen is almost certainly no longer present to be studied. Is there a causal relationship between the sightings and the bridge collapse? This would require a defined mechanism connecting the two phenomena. No such mechanism has been proposed that does not rely on the supernatural, and no physical evidence links the creature, whatever it was, to the structural failure of the bridge. This question may be permanently unresolvable not because the answer is unknowable in principle, but because the only evidence that could establish a causal link, something like trace residues on the bridge matching the entity, or a documented physical interaction, is not the kind of evidence this case could ever produce. Why did the report stop after the collapse? The most likely answer is that the disaster consumed the community's attention and the media's coverage, that the social conditions that had sustained the reports evaporated overnight. But this remains an inference. The precise dynamics of how mass suggestion begins and ends in a small community after a catastrophic event have not been documented with the specificity this case would require. The Mothman story endures not because it has been solved, but because every explanation, including the most rational one, leaves something unaddressed. Over 100 people reported something they could not identify in the months before a disaster that killed 46 of their neighbors. The disaster is explained. The something is not. That gap is not evidence of the paranormal. It is evidence of the limits of what testimony alone can establish, and of how much remains unknown even in well-documented events.